there's a reason people struggle and risk their lives to come to the United States, right? But this method and this way of doing it is not compassionate at all, despite what the Biden administration says. They're saying that they're being compassionate because these people have no choice. That's why they come here. But there are alternatives, and there is a better way to do this. They don't have to sacrifice themselves or
Right.
risk their lives to get here. And that's what's happening now. And by the, what is it, 8 million you said? I mean, that is absolutely an astronomical figure.
Billions of dollars. Actually, hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. And God only knows what else are going to NGOs, believe it or not. And they are the linchpin to the migration crisis. That is what is happening with our nation. That is what is happening when we look at what is happening at our southern border, the shock of what is going on there. Right now in Buffalo, New York, they're saying no more. They're saying, we are not taking another busload of people here because they can't. Because not only can they not afford it, but the people that they're getting are being arrested. There are all kinds of issues right there right now in Erie County. I was just talking to some of my producers about that over at Fox, about what was going on there. But when you think about what is precipitating this, not just the Biden administration's, policy of open borders, which is insane in of it itself, but what is happening with NGOs in Central America, in Mexico, in the United States, the amount of taxpayer dollars that are going to each illegal migrant that is taken in by like Catholic Charities or any other Amnesty International. I don't know. There's so many of them that are taking on these immigrant issues, but how that money is being recycled, what is that money being used for? Do you know that there is a very good chance that if you donated money to one of these non-governmental organizations to move migrants to the United States, that even if you're like a Republican, a conservative, whatever you are, that your money could have been recycled through that charity and then into the hands of not only, I think, friends of lawmakers, so to speak, that are running some of these NGOs, but they get recycled back into our system, into our political system, and get shuffled back into the Democratic Party. I actually briefed Congress on this years ago. And I talked to the border caucus about this. And it is terrifying to think how shadowy groups with hidden agendas are flooding a town near you with unvetted military-aged males. And they're doing it more than likely with your tax dollars. That's how this game is played. I've seen these NGOs in action. I've been to Guatemala on the border of Honduras and watched what was going on and watched the money coming out of people's hands and being paid and distributed. I've seen that also in Mexico, in some of these quote unquote tent cities, that not only NGOs were vested highly in keeping people in these tent cities on the streets, but the immigration lawyers in the United States were very interested in what was going on in those tent cities. And they also got a big chunk of cash for helping these migrants figure out a way to stay in the United States, even when they didn't have appropriate asylum claims. So I have something very special for you today. Yes, this is big. I have two very, very important people on this show that are experts in this area, and they're going to tell you how this game is played because they were right there. They were watching it. They know what's going down. They live in the region. They live in Central America. And we're on a mission here at the Sara Carter Show to expose these monsters. And that is why I have Bert Hernandez, who worked for many years with the United States government, and Mario Duarte, who's the former head of intelligence from Guatemala, on this show. And I want to say a quick thank you to Allegiance Gold as well for everything they do to help me bring this show to you. Thank you so much, Allegiance Gold. I truly, truly appreciate what you do and your support for the Sarah Carter Show. And gold and silver allow you to protect what you've worked so hard for. And they give you back the control and the privacy that you need. And that's why I've partnered with Allegiance Gold. They will allow you to diversify. And what do I say all the time? Diversify, diversify, diversify. And you can do that by protecting your assets, your IRA, your 401k with physical gold and silver, or have it delivered securely right to your front door. Get $5,000 of free silver now on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sarah sent you. That's $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sarah sent you. So don't wait, call or click today, 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARAH. SARA, no H, or go to protectwithsarah.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we can prepare. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARAH, no H, protectwithsarah.com. I have not only, I think, world experts on immigration, terrorism, the threats that we're seeing in the Western Hemisphere on the show today, but two very, very good friends of mine, one who has not been on the show before. Hi, Bert Hernandez, or I can say Humberto Hernandez, or and Mario Duarte. So Bert Hernandez served. Hi, you served 31 years in the United States government in various agencies. You're an expert at what is happening here in the Western Hemisphere, particularly with the threats we're facing, I think, from adversaries, as well as the migration issue that we're seeing here in the United States. And I think it's not just here. I include the entire Western Hemisphere and the globe, for that matter, when it comes to this issue. And Mario Duarte, who has been on the Sarah Carter Show before, former Secretary of Intelligence from Guatemala.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much both for being on the show.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm going to start with Bert first because Mario did not invite us to his chili cook-off in Guatemala. He's now trying to gaslight us, which is something he is picking up, I think, from the Biden administration. I'm a little concerned. He's gaslighting us into believing that he did invite us to his chili cook-off. But we'll talk about that after the show, Mario, not now. But I'm going to toss the first question to you, Bert.
Okay.
You have spent so much of your life in service of our nation overseas. You've seen the ups and the downs. You're seeing right now what is happening in Central America, in the United States. I mean, I think we're going to have over 8 million is what they're estimating. And that's a low ball right now of illegal migrants that have come into our country since Biden has been in office. You work in the region and you've worked in the region. What is going on here? Why is this so much different than past immigration waves? And what is your assessment of what is happening here?
Okay, yeah. I mean, the first word that comes to mind, and I know it's overused, and it's a tragedy, right? Because what you see happening throughout or at least across our border, but throughout Mexico, throughout Central America, is just nonstop human tragedy with what's happening to children, to women, to adolescents, to men, to old ladies. The people that are transporting them to the United States are not nice people, right? These are criminal elements equivalent to drug traffickers and terrorists. I mean, and it's just an absolute tragedy. And very, very close contacts all along the border, on both sides of the border, who tell me this almost on a daily basis. And it's almost to the point where it's just so overwhelming. We're so saturated, and it's easily fixable. I mean, it's not something that is inevitable, and it's not something that has to happen in the way that it's happening. There are better ways to have people come to the U.S. and enjoy the American dream. I mean, my family did it. My wife's family did it. Many, many people whom I know did it, not just from Latin America, from all over the world. I mean, there's a reason people struggle and risk their lives to come to the United States, right? But this method, this way of doing it, is not compassionate at all. Despite what the Biden administration says, they're saying that they're being compassionate because these people have no choice. That's why they come here. But there are alternatives, and there is a better way to do this. They don't have to sacrifice themselves or
Right.
risk their lives to get here, and that's what's happening now. And by the what is it, 8 million? You said. I mean, that is absolutely an astronomical figure, and it's hard to believe. And I think that's what comes down to. A lot of people just have trouble believing that it's really that bad. But I grew up on the border between Texas and Mexico, and I have a lot of friends that are still on the border. They live there. They see it every day. They tell me there was a period when people were just sleeping on their front lawn, when it was 95 degrees outside at 8 o'clock in the morning. I mean, they wake up, they're opening their door to take their children to school, and there's 6 men just laying there, not threatening them in any way. It's an uncomfortable feeling, right? When you wake up, you open your front door, you walk out, and there's all these guys just sitting there
Oh,
hoping to find a glass of water, right?
right.
I mean,
I've talked, I've
so
talked,
that's the reality.
I've talked to
Go ahead.
ranchers in Texas who I've been on their ranches. I've talked to the wives, to the ranch hands, to the children, where men have been knocking on their windows, and the farmer is out in the fields and his wife is home, maybe doing homeschool study. This is one example. And she had men all around her house peeking in the windows, and she was calling her husband and she was terrified. How dangerous is this policy, this open borders policy, Bert, when the government is basically turning a blind eye? They can't vet people properly. I know this. I've interviewed Border Patrol and ICE officers over and over again who've told me that they are not vetting these people properly. So not only are children being harmed and women being harmed, but people are coming into this country. I just wrote a story. I had originally broke the story about an Egyptian that they were looking for who had flown into Panama. He was on the terror watch list. And 2 months later, just this past week, he was apprehended, thankfully, in Costa Rica. But he was connected to terrorism, to al-Nusra and al-Qaeda affiliated. He can't be the only one, right? I mean, there's more of them out there.
No, correct. I mean, Mario and I are familiar with many cases where exactly that scenario took place. In that case, it wasn't al-Nusra, it was ISIS, using forged documents of various different types of passports with better access to the U.S. than a Syrian or Afghan passport. So these people know that they can get into the flow of migrants, and those were only a few. So we're only catching a very small percentage of these types of people, and that's just on the Al Qaeda type terrorists that we're talking about. And when I worked very closely with the bureau and others on the counterterrorism front, and we go through pains to vet liaison partners, police services that are working with us. But yet, and even frankly myself, going through entering the U.S. on my diplomatic passport, I would be sent to secondary from time to time because my name was so common. But had I just walked across the border, nobody would, that would have been given a free phone and free healthcare and who knows what else, and welcomed into the country. But when I travel in on my diplomatic passport, I get sent to secondary. So, I mean, where is the consistency? Well, how does that make any sense when criminals are allowed to just kind of come across the border completely unvetted? But if you apply for a visa in Dubai or, Berlin, you're put through the ringer. Or in Guatemala City, you have like a 95% rejection rate, and then we act shocked that people are coming to the U.S. We reject everybody that tries to apply for a legitimate visa to come on, fly on American Airlines or United and come to the States legally. But then if that same person shows up in Del Rio or Eagle Pass, Texas, they're like, "Hey, welcome to America." So you reject these people in the consulates around the world, and yet welcome them, wholeheartedly across the border just because they happen to make it all the way through Mexico, show up in Eagle Pass and walk across the river, and now all of a sudden they're welcomed into the U.S. So what is the difference there, right? And I've actually had those discussions with consular officials, and I am told that I'm called this or that, and how that my ideas would just be exploiting people. I said, the ones that are exploiting these people are the coyotes that are bringing them up through Mexico, the people that are making them, charging them $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to come across the border, right? And they're indentured servants for a while. If you're a child or a woman, you most likely have been abused sexually somewhere along the way, if not continuously along the way. When you get into the States, that probably continues to pay off your debt to these people. You've probably been used as a mule, for drug cartels on some level. And so it's just something that doesn't make any sense to the people that say that they're being compassionate to these people by opening up the borders, but yet rejecting them as intending immigrants when they're applying for visas in the U.S. consulates around the region, right? So when you cross the border, are you not an intending immigrant?
Right.
When you cross the border, are you going to Disneyland from there? You're coming as a tourist. What? So that makes, when you bring these kinds of inconsistencies up to consular officials, they really don't like it, because they're not used to being challenged in that way. But that's the facts. If you're not an intending immigrant coming across the border in Texas or Arizona, then what are you? And if that same person had applied for a visa in Mexico City, Guatemala City, or any consulate throughout Latin America, they would have been denied. 95% certainty. So it makes no sense to me why this is happening and why it's called compassion.
Yeah, it's not compassion, because the only people these consulars is helping, and the only people that the administration is helping by its open border policy, is the cartels and the human traffickers and all the most nefarious people. So in a sense, they're aiding and abetting the cartels. I would love to see a district attorney or somebody out there with courage to bring charges against them, like saying, hey, your policies are aiding and abetting cartels. That would be an interesting twist of irony in the United States for somebody to actually charge someone for aiding and abetting the cartels, because we could prove it. Folks, it's Mike Lindell's 20th anniversary sale. MyPillow, mypillow.com/Carter. Yes, if you go there, you are going to get discounts on all the great MyPillow products, like the MyPillow slippers, which I love to wear indoor and outdoor. You can do that because they're made to handle the terrain of Texas. Yes, thank you so much, Mike Lindell. I never have to worry about stepping on a tarantula when I walk out of my house. Yeah, can you believe that? I actually have tarantulas around my house. It's crazy. And guess what? My dogs get a great night's sleep. This one right now, if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, is laying on my couch. The other one's underneath my desk, laying on the MyPillow dog bed. And we've got MyPillow dog beds in the house. That's what they sleep on at night when they go to bed, on their comfy MyPillow dog beds. Our kids have MyPillow sheets, MyPillow slippers as well, MyPillow pillows. You're going to get everything you need, though, if you go to mypillow.com/Carter. This is so important. Go to mypillow.com/Carter and use promo code Carter to get the queen size MyPillow for only $19.98 during Mike's MyPillow 20th anniversary sale. Might as time go by. Or call 1-800-685-7221. There you'll find not only an amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all the MyPillow products, including the MyPillow slippers, pet beds, blankets, and more. Get the best night's sleep at mypillow.com/Carter and use promo code Carter, or call 1-800-685-7221, mypillow.com/Carter. Promo code Carter. If you are loving this conversation and you want to help us get more guests that keep you in the know, make sure you're subscribed down below and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. You really do make a difference. Part of that, and this is what I wanted to talk to you both about, is the non-governmental organizations, the NGOs and the United Nations. They both operate. Okay, there are some NGOs that are amazing. They do a lot of great work. I'm not taking away from people that actually want to help other human beings, and Doctors Without Borders. I know that could be a debate there on some of it, but there are good people that want to help other people. I'm talking about NGOs that have figured out the game, that are pocketing millions, if not billions of dollars, both from U.S. taxpayers and the UN and wherever else they're going to get grant money, or from private donors, and are utilizing that money to actually, once again, aid and abet the cartels and others to bringing people into the US. And once the people get here, they have to be housed. They got to get transportation. They get a cell phone. They're getting taxpayer funding, or NGOs are helping them. And those NGOs are getting paid per person. I know some of them, Catholic charities. I'm a Catholic, but gosh, they make a lot of money off each individual. Do you find that there's a problem with NGOs where you're at?
Well, definitely there is. It's all over the place. It has become a what's the right term? It's a vicious circle of money, flow from the United States and other donor countries towards very specific NGOs around the world. And then somehow those monies actually end up back in the United States in other NGOs that end up becoming actual, political donors. We've spoken about that, openly, and it's true. It's a vicious circle of convenience and money laundering, if you want to call it that.
Right. And it weakens Guatemala. It weakens Guatemala. It weakens the region. It weakens the US. It weakens the people because they're not given the tools. So if you're an NGO, you would think that you would want to give the tools so that somebody can learn to build their own life and not become reliant or dependent on anyone else. Instead, they're held in captivity in a way by these NGOs and by our governments.
They're incentivized to waste money. That's the bottom line, right? I mean, the more money they spend, the more they will get the following year, right? And they justify it by, we're trying to help people learn these trades. We're helping them do this. We're helping them do that. Well, how many people is that? When you actually get down into the numbers, you're talking about dozens or a few hundred at best over a couple of year period. So if you have, like back in the days, it was 25 to 30,000 detected people from Guatemala right on the border. Those were some of the statistics that we had seen back in those days. So if you take 2 years to train 500 people, I mean, and you're getting 25,000 a month from that country, that's not a really good figure, and you're spending millions of dollars to do that. So, why not just promote foreign direct investment to build the roads that need to be built? Because Guatemala is like, we'll use Guatemala as the example. It's a small country. Some of the most popular tourist sites are within 100 miles of the capital city. Yet it takes 3 to 4 hours on a good day to get there. And you can't promote even internal tourism, much less foreign tourism, to some of these sites with that kind of infrastructure. And those are real jobs, right? Those are the building of the roads, the maintaining of the roads, the building of the hotels, the building of restaurants. And I mean, people say, well, those are not real jobs. Yes, it's more real than what is available now. And then that's what a lot of these immigrants end up doing when they get to the States anyway, right? They end up working in these kind of service industries. So it's kind of a 6 of one, half dozen of another. They can either do it there where they're happy and they know, and they don't want to leave and they don't put themselves at risk. But we penalize that kind of behavior and we incentivize these programs where we spend millions of dollars to train 500 people over 2 years.
Let me ask you this. The NGOs, they play a huge role in how a lot of this evolves when it comes to Central America and when it comes to providing assistance. What is it how do they present themselves basically? And because there is no oversight, does that create a huge problem for the governments in those regions? So like, for example, if I have an NGO operating in my country, let's say I'm running Guatemala, you're running Guatemala, you know what's going on. And there is no oversight over the money, the dollars that are pouring in and what those are going to. Does that present a huge problem?
Let's put it like this. The NGOs is a very, very old ecosystem in the region. These are long-established NGOs that know the game, that probably even were part of designing the game itself. There is a lot of them that were created in the US, some others in Europe, and they are very adept at obviously absorbing all these contracts that USAID and other agencies offer from their from their own people, from people inside the NGOs. We know that only about 15 to 20% tops actually gets spent into helping. The rest, 80 to 85%, is used to pay very, very nice salaries to all these advisors, who, by the way, happen to be very close to specific, Democrat political actors in the U.S., very close to specific political actors in the UN and other European countries, who happen to be, avid and rabid enemies, at least not enemies, but at least, how would you say, what's the word I'm looking for? Supporters. Of adversaries of specific people, like they were the first ones that came up with articles against President Trump. They were the ones that attacked us when we decided to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And they were the ones that saying, oh, if you do this, Guatemala is going to be open to terrorist attacks because we know all these people that are not going to be, accepting that decision from the government. And these are the same people that, show up in marches that are pro-Palestine marches here in Guatemala and claiming that they are peaceful people. But at the same time, a couple of weeks before, they were saying that, no, they are going to be the ones attacking us because of that decision. So it's an ecosystem of players and actors that know how to play and rig the game. They make a lot of money. They become very wealthy. As long as they become active and proactive in their activism, in favor of woke policies towards the region. And here is the worst part of it all: how you said how ironic the situation is with specific actors. There is a lady here in Guatemala that was recently indicted, and she was actually a warrant for her arrest was issued because she stole about $1.5 million from a USAID program, and she used it to actually buy stocks from a specific bank. Now, that investigation was run by U.S. agencies, but still she shows up in U.S. State Department sponsored talks online, and she's hiding somewhere in Spain, but she's still that person, right? While there is some activists from the right here in Guatemala that were simply for being activists of the right added to this famous NGOs list, which is a weapon of political condemnation, right? Then you have, but here is the other part, right? People that are a former president of Guatemala that is a convicted felon in the United States, about 4 Congress people that are on specific, drug trafficking lists and these NGOs lists as well, and OFAC.
Right.
In the last in the last 4th of July party at the embassy, they were invited to the embassy because they are obviously actors with a lot of social power, and they actually could call protests and everything, but they needed on their side to make sure that their favorite parties would make it to the runoff in the election that we're facing right now in Guatemala.
Based on what I'm hearing from Mario, Bert, is it been your experience that those in charge not only weaponize the system, but that they're as corruptible as you can imagine? Like, I mean, in the US, we're facing that right now, right? As we see what's happening. But is that corruption just so rampant, it's hard to get anything solid, any kind of solid policies enacted in these regions?
I think, yeah, I mean, when that's part of it for sure, but we were successful at being able to implement policies that I was either allied with or had direct control over wherever I had been overseas, right? And despite what had been told to me, despite what you read in the media, whether U.S. or local, about the extensive corruption, yes, that exists. There's no doubt it exists. It exists, right? It's part of human nature, sadly, but it is something that can be mitigated, right? I mean, at the end of the day, wherever you are, whether you're in the U.S. or it's about looking at the risks and mitigating them, because your job there is to look out after U.S. interest, right? In my case, if you're in the U.S. embassy, your job is to promote U.S. interest and to protect U.S. interest. And in allied countries, a lot of that is really made easier by the country having shared values and shared objectives. And there's a lot of countries that have that, yet we don't treat them that way, right? We don't treat them as partners. We treat them really, really poorly in a lot of ways. And I use an example. I know it's a simple example, but it's something that I think is universal. A lot of people can relate to, and certainly a lot of liaison partners that I've worked with over the many countries. I think I've been in 40 something countries working with different nationalities. And it is, you don't go to your brother's house and tell them that, the couch is ugly, the TV's in the wrong place, and that the food was terrible, right? I mean, you just don't go to people, you don't behave that way as a guest, right? And expect to be rewarded for it. But that is sometimes the mentality of a lot of officials. They go into their, as a guest in whatever country X. We can use Guatemala as the latest example. But it is, and that's what it precisely people do. And that's what's happening in countries all across the region and all around the world, where we go in there and we are saying, we have the checkbook and you're going to do it this way because we said so. Even though we don't like your cooking and we don't like the couch being there and it's the TV is too small and you should get you should have X service instead of this service. And it's just, it's really disheartening, and it really puts the U.S. at risk. At the end of the day, you're not promoting U.S. interest. You're not protecting U.S. interest, which is ultimately your objective, right? We're there in U.S. Embassy, whatever your job is to, and I think we've forgotten that across the board. I mean, we're there to promote U.S. interest and protect U.S. interest, and it can be done. Is it difficult in some places? Is it more difficult in some places than others? 100%. But you have to find a way to work within what you're given, right? You have a battleground, and you got to maneuver your way around it, right? I think there's a West Point saying or something that says, the best laid plans don't survive first contact with the enemy, right? Right. And so when, you're like, if you think, well, I'm supposed to do A and then B and then C, and if you're that rigid, you're just not going to succeed. And you have to say, okay, what's our plan B? How are we going to work with the people that we do? This is what we got. And you can't say, oh, I'm not working with that guy because because Pepito says he's corrupt. There's no proof of it. He comes out in an opinion piece on Sunday, which was very famous until recently in a place like Guatemala, and they take the visa away, right? Whereas people that have arrest warrants are given, refuge and asylum in the U.S. and $200,000 a year jobs as Georgetown professors of law ethics because they are the good corrupt, right? There's, like we say in Spanish, los corruptos buenos, right? They're on our side, so the ends justifies the means, and that's what you see in a lot of these policies. And I think that it's so long as the good guys win, if they're corrupt, there are good guys, and we need them to be in charge because in the long run that will make the country better. And it just hasn't worked. There's no country in the world where socialism has succeeded, right? There's none.
Right.
Yet we keep talking about it as something that has to be done in the right way. It has to be done. The true socialism hasn't succeeded. But I can tell you that being poor in North Korea or Cuba is way worse than being poor in Mexico or Guatemala or the U.S. Because if that wasn't the case, you would have people going across the DMZ in the other direction, right?
And you never do.
If it was so great, you never see that. You never see the rafts leaving Miami headed for Cuba, right? No, you don't see the people leaving Guatemala going to Nicaragua, which is a much easier trip.
But we are seeing a push, which is so. You mentioned this earlier, and I'm going to ask if you could expand on it. You were talking about the fact that that people in their own countries, right, aren't given the basic tools to stay, but they're leaving for the United States, but it's not for it's for economic reasons. It's not because there's a massive natural disaster or a war. They're coming for economic reasons, meaning they are incentivized, which is why we've been so focused on a lot of the NGOs. I know they're going to have an oversight hearing on this coming up. And it's going to be an investigation into some of the NGOs and what's been going on with that. But I believe the NGOs themselves, too, are being manipulated. So we're not seeing just, I think the foot soldiers, like you said, the men and women on the ground, State Department officials, others who are working, doing their best to try to create these relations with other nations in our hemisphere, they're doing everything they can. But the people on top know, they know what they're doing. And they're playing these games. And then we've got these NGOs that could easily be manipulated as well, or some within are playing these games. And there's no oversight. And now we have migration weaponized, which is what we've seen over the last, I believe, since, especially, I would say even since Trump. I would say even going all the way back. We've known that, the migration issues, they come in waves. However, with Biden, it's more than we've ever seen. What can we learn from watching maybe the NGOs? We've heard that more people in the NGOs move along to the US, that more money they get from the UN pushes people more towards the United States, that they're able to set up the journey, so to speak, for these migrant caravans. What can we learn from that could teach us something about what is happening to us and what is happening to the rest of the Western Hemisphere? What do we need to do?
I mean, when you look at, I think one of the first things that needs to be done, and it hasn't been done. There was an attempt to do it, and going back to the Guatemalan example, is some kind of oversight, right? There has been very little to no oversight over the vast majority of the funding that goes to these type of NGOs.
Why not?
Or civil society.
Why not?
I think it's resisted. I think there was a lot of resistance in the system. I know I saw it when either staffers or the congressmen themselves or senators would come to various embassies and start asking questions about accountability. And I'm talking about accountability in a financial sense, right? What were these funds used? And that's where a lot of the abuse or misuse or misrepresentations were starting to come out, right? When you start asking questions, something that we discussed recently with the staffer of a congressman from Texas was, where is the oversight, right? Especially if they're using tax, if it's private donations, that's one thing, right? But if it's taxpayer funded money going to certain NGOs or certain civil society groups, where is the oversight? I know in my cases and in the military, there is constant reviews, if not monthly, quarterly reviews of what are the expenditures and justifications for X and Y and Z. But we don't see that in a lot of these because it's just to help people, right? We're just trying to help people. Yet, as Mario said, we saw it when I was in the expat community in Guatemala. I mean, a large percentage of the best paid expats are officials related to these NGOs. It's not the BMW regional chairperson or the Nestle. Yeah, I mean, they are well compensated, but those are private companies and they sell billions of dollars in the region. Right? But NGOs were up there with them in terms of where they're buying houses, where they send their children to school, and where is the accountability? The BMW, Nestle, Lexus, whatever, they have, boards, that they have to answer to, stockholders they have to answer to, accounting firms that have, if they're listed on the New York Stock Exchange, there's a lot of rules they have to follow. But a lot of these NGOs in Guatemala were never reviewed. The money would come and go. Nobody had any idea where it was going, where it was coming from. And when a law was passed, that was, again, it was under the guise of this is a threat to human rights. There was a lot of resistance to a law to review where the money was coming from, to reduce foreign influence over a sovereign country's internal affairs, right? That's essentially what is happening with a lot of these NGOs. They are upsetting the balance of power by incentivizing bad behavior, whether it's illegal immigration, the drug trade, because they have, in some places, they have relationships which allow them to operate in drug controlled areas that, where they wouldn't be able to operate if they didn't have some kind of agreement with these people. So, and what the drug cartels aren't just going to be like, bleeding hearts and opening up their regions to these people for no reason, right? There's got to be a reason that they're doing that. They're working together, and it's okay. Well, we're going to send 1,000 people, and you're going to pay us X amount, because that's just how it goes. I mean, they're not altruistic people, right? Drug dealers by their very nature, And I think going back to
come on,
Chapo
Bert.
example,
Every once in a blue moon. Every once in a blue moon, I've
Yeah.
seen a tear
Chapo,
fall out of their eyes
Yeah.
when they
Yep.
lose their cocaine.
Exactly.
When their
exactly.
semi-submersible gets taken by the Coast Guard.
$1 billion. Yep. Yeah, it's like that's $1 billion up in smoke.
Yeah, then they're crying.
Chapo would probably, I bet you Chapo would be let go if he agreed to move to Ukraine and use some of his resources to help the Ukraine. I bet that's kind of the kind of world we're living in, it seems like. But back to the NGOs, I mean, there's no accountability for results. It's all about good intentions, right? They just say, we're just trying to help people. And so they just get a blank check.
Yeah, so you don't ask us any questions because we're just trying to help everyone. Yep. Mario, is that your
you guys are agreeing?
Mario,
Yep.
is that your is that your assessment of what kind of I mean, you're aware of some of the actions the NGOs have taken when you were working in Guatemala as head of intelligence?
You witnessed it with me when we were close to the border, and
I did.
No narcos were actually handing out the money given to them by NGOs. You saw it firsthand. And again, because they are, they are under the guise that they're doing good things and they're trying to help people and their good intentions. But, there's a saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So it's exactly that. And the worst part of it all is that it's very hypocritical, because while all these people, all these NGOs, all these political actors are playing footsie with the cartels, with the human traffickers, mind you, also partaking in the use of drugs, in the use of forced prostitution and child prostitution. They are, painted as the saints and the saviors of the region because they are the only ones that are doing good, and the rest, the status quo, that's the word they like to use, are just all corrupt because they don't allow, LGBTQ things to be taught in school. They have used a lot of different gaslighting, narratives to actually paint conservatives as evil and corrupt in the region, when actually the promoters of corruption are on the other side of the political spectrum.
Bert, Mario, thank you so much for being on the show, for going through everything that we possibly could in this short period of time. That's why I'm going to bring you back on the show, but to explain to the audience how their taxpayer dollars are being misused and what is really going on as we battle this horrific open borders policy that the Biden administration has basically pushed on the American people. I mean, this is a huge humanitarian crisis as well as a national security crisis. And both of you are doing everything, and I will do everything I can to fight it and expose it and protect not only the people coming into our nation from the hands of the cartels, the human traffickers, and governments that have failed to protect them, but as well as the people in America and our national security. Folks, if you love today's show and you want even more of the Sara Carter Show, make sure you rate this podcast 5 stars and subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, and on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God bless immigrants all over the world, that they might find the right way to enter this beautiful nation and be protected from those that wish them harm. And God bless the great state of Texas.